So welcome to the webinar, Strategies to Promote Rural School Sustainability. Thank you for joining our webinar series. This is a partnership between the Local Government Department to deliver webinar topics related to local government and community leaders across BC. We hope that you'll find this series to provide new information and enable discussion between experts in academia, industry, and government in an affordable, accessible, and sustainable way. As Darby already mentioned, the webinar will be recorded and archived on both the Rural BC website and the Local Government Department website so that it will create a lasting resource for both communities and regions. Following today's presentation, we would like your feedback, so you will receive a survey where we're asking for your input into today's webinar, but also future topics of interest. So I'd like to thank today's presenters for joining us. We have two people who are on the line, and their names are Gary Champagne, who is the Chief Administrative Officer for the District of Wells. We have Ken Campbell, who's Secretary Treasurer for School District number 50 in Haida Gwaii. And then within the room, we have Claire Avison, who works for the Ministry of Education. She's the Executive Director of the Cross-Sector Strategic Initiatives Branch, which includes portfolio responsibility for healthy schools, neighbourhood learning centres, and support for vulnerable students. With Claire today, we have Ben Hyman and Philip Davidson. Ben is the Director of the Cross-Sector Strategic Initiatives Branch, and Phil is the Policy Analyst within the branch. So I'd like to thank the presenters, and we're just going to move to the next slide, and I'll give you a little bit of an overview of what you can expect in terms of the agenda. So we've just had our introductions. We're going to move to the presentations from the speakers that have just been outlined. And as Darby mentioned, we'd like to save considerable time for questions and a dialogue with you, and just a few minutes for closure. So with that, I'll hand it over to Claire.
Thank you very much, and thank you for joining us to talk about our ongoing work to develop neighbourhood learning centres. But I gather before I begin, I have some responsibility for introducing some poll questions. And so there are two that we're going to ask of the people participating. So the first one is why you're interested in today's webinar.
Yeah. Sorry, Claire. Sure. If you could just please indicate here, you being the audience, please indicate which of these answers the question appropriately for you. So, sorry, Claire, I guess I'm cutting in and reading the question for you, but why are you interested in today's webinar? I'm generally interested in rural schools. I work for a rural school. I work in a rural community concerned about possible school closures, and I'm interested in learning more about how local governments and schools work together. So please answer those now. We are going to take a tally of these once we get to a consensus, and it looks like there isn't much movement now, so we can jot these down. Okay, thank you. And our next question: is your community experiencing challenges keeping schools open? Again, if you could please just vote appropriately. Movement. Oh, maybe we're there. Oh, people may be changing their mind on this. Oh. Okay. Great. Thanks very much. Thanks, Claire.
Great. Those poll questions are a really interesting way to start, and I'm heartened to see that the majority of folks indicated that they're interested in learning more about how local governments and schools can work more effectively together, because we're very interested in that. We hear from school districts that it's difficult working with municipalities, and we hear from municipalities that it's difficult to work with school districts, and so we're trying to figure that out, and we're certainly going to be really interested in hearing from our colleagues from the municipal sector around how we can better support and further that relationship. So thanks for joining us to talk about our ongoing work to develop neighbourhood learning centres. Some of you will be quite familiar with this concept. Probably every district in the province has schools that incorporate some aspect of a neighbourhood learning centre approach, and there is a really large number of schools who have some kind of joint use agreement with municipalities, which is great. we just like to make that more uniform across the province. So the next slide, Darby. So on the slide is a vision statement. This isn't a new concept. It really builds on the historical role of schools as the center of community life and building on the community school movement of the 1970s. It's essentially a way to revitalize the whole idea of schools, not just as places where students learn the curriculum, but also as places where the whole neighborhood can access learning and community services. And with an NLC approach, we want to extend the concept to all schools, not just community schools, places where schools can support community use as determined by how the community selects to see that space used. Next slide. So I won't read what's on this slide, but generally it illustrates through various government announcements, a couple of these are throne speech references, another a budget speech reference. It just demonstrates government's interest in using schools more fully to accommodate a wider range of programs and services for the community, students, parents, families, both inside and outside of school hours. We invest billions of dollars in school buildings, and they really have a quite modest usage. Don't challenge me on that, Ken. And we'd like to see them more fully used. Next slide. There are two paths or main facets to neighborhood learning centers. One is a capital project, so government is willing to build capital space specifically for community use. And the other path is a non-capital one, but they feature very similar things. We both are looking at extended hours of operation, so beyond 8 to 4. We're looking at consulting the community around how that space is used, not just assuming about how they'd like to use it. And we're also looking for policies at the school district and school level that support that broader use. Next slide. This slide just illustrates some of our engagement efforts. We have started with our own education sector, but we are hoping to extend that well beyond. We've, as is illustrated there, written to all our government colleagues and have had bilateral meetings with the ones where this work is most closely aligned with their mandates. We've had an education stakeholders forum. In fact, we've had one sort of early days and a more recent one specifically focused on how to effectively engage that sector. And then there's a bunch of other efforts. I mean, the point here is that we're really looking not just to promote this, but to engage the broader sectors, the broader government sector, education sector, interest in the NGO sector, the municipal sector, as well as the business sector. These efforts will continue, but you can see where we've been. Some of the concerns that we've heard during our sessions have been with respect to collective agreements and liability issues, and we're trying to capture and share how those issues are managed by various schools and districts, because there will not be one size fits all, and there are some really creative solutions out there, and we're trying to capture those and share those. One of the things that we're trying to do with this initiative is really shift the school culture, which is huge. So it is no longer thinking of schools only for education purposes, but for broader programming and services. And so that classroom may not only be used for a single purpose, it might have sort of multi-purposes. So just don't want to underestimate that, and we're really trying not to do that. Leasing and rental costs is also an issue. Schools aren't expected to take on additional costs associated with this initiative. It's intended to be more cost recovery, but there's some sensitivity around that, particularly policy implications. For instance, an easy one to consider is early learning and childcare. If the costs are very high, then it's hard to attract the service providers, and so there's different tolerance levels and different appropriate levels for leasing and rental costs. And once again, we are trying to understand how that works in the various districts and schools so that we can capture and share that. Once again, there won't be one size fits all. What works in Haida Gwaii isn't necessarily what will work in Saanich. One of the other concerns that's been raised in terms of issues is other policy direction. For instance, we have carbon reduction policies, and we have policies around reducing operating costs, and now we're talking about keeping our lights on and our heat on for extended hours. So we recognize that there's some possible confusion there, so we're looking to address those where possible. We put workload. We hear that principals have huge responsibilities in the system, principals and other administrators, and this might seem like an additional burden, and so we're trying to figure out how that works, and once again, there is no one model there, but trying to capture how it's working in different schools and jurisdictions and be able to share those. And community schools is one model, but neighborhood learning centers doesn't envision more than one model. And the last concern, not surprisingly, is funding. And so we'll move to the next slide. Not that I don't want to address that, but just the next slide specifically speaks to funding. Well, we recognize that this initiative needs resourcing, and we're looking to address that. School Community Connections, which provided $10 million in funding and has been administered by UBCM and BC School Trustees Association, and that provided grants up to a maximum of $30,000 per district, which is not a lot, but from our understanding is that those grants were hugely helpful in supporting consultations and other small projects to support that collaborative working and use of school space. Government's property disposal policy has also really supported this initiative, so school districts can no longer dispose of school property without having the approval by the minister. So once again, in large measure, leave schools in play to support broader community use. And a part of the work that we're doing to address this issue includes building a case to support resourcing. We recognize issues such as coordination and wear and tear on space. There are real costs associated with that. And we'll talk about this, I think, on one of the subsequent slides, but a part of that work includes better understanding what exactly is happening within schools, because schools are owned by school districts, and they make those decisions. And so a ministry does not necessarily know with any precision what's going on, and we're trying to address that. There are also a variety of other grants that have been used with success to leverage this initiative, and we have some links to those on our website, and I believe that the Rural BC Secretariat website also has some references to grant sources. The United Way has also been actively involved in a number of school districts and a number of community schools, and they offer some support and some funding opportunities. And there's another a couple of local funds. I'll just mention a couple. And one's the Aviva Community Fund. There's a link to that on our website. And I know that Roslyn's Secondary School is one of the 3 finalists for one of these grants. And the Royal Bank Foundation provides some grants for some after-school usage, and as does Pepsi has a new grant program, and I think that they're actually advertised on TV. I saw one last night. So there are some sources of funding, and we're trying to make that easy for people to access. So next slide. So in terms of strategy to overcome some of the concerns and challenges that we identified in the previous slide, a part of that includes engaging the municipal sector, and we gave a workshop up at UBCM's annual convention, at which we had our minister not only attend, she stayed the whole time. And so we recognize that engagement is a huge an important aspect of this strategy, and we will certainly be very interested in what the people people involved in this webinar have to say in terms of how to best engage with them and to support furthering of this initiative. Communication, strong relationships amongst the core players are key to the success of this initiative, and these require good, ongoing communication, like all relationships, and we recognize that and are trying to promote that. And in lots of jurisdictions, those exist, and some not so much. We also recognize that these efforts need the addition of some clear provincial policy, and we are working on those, both to remove the barriers to the establishment of neighbourhood learning centres as well as to promote them. And we've also been actively working on tools and resources to support this work. So school districts vary in terms of their size and capacity, and so we're trying to support those that have more limited capacity and looking to the larger districts to help in that work. That includes sharing some best practices. That includes, some templates for things like joint use agreements or contracts of various nature. We're helping schools and communities understand how to do community consultations and to truly work in a collaborative style. And we're providing other resource kits for schools to support that work. Next slide, please. And so, as I've already mentioned, some of the continuing work includes developing an inventory of activity as well as space that's available. So we're working with a couple of our key sector groups, including our secretary treasurers and our principals and administrators, to better understand what space is available and what kind of services are already currently operating in schools. We will need that to support a business case to get resourcing. So the inventory is a key part of the business case, which is also identified here. We're trying to not only honor some of the fabulous and creative work that's happening in the district, but also trying to share some of those stories, because they really do look very different, and some of them are just so inspiring. So we're trying to collect those and create those, share those, and those are on our website. We're trying to keep our website dynamic, and so we're feeding them onto the website regularly. We're actually trying to collect those. I think I've already mentioned the community of practice. So the real learning is peer-to-peer. So the school districts have more to learn from one another than they probably have to learn from the provincial government. And so we're trying to create a space and opportunity for that, and to allow the leaders to profile some of the creative things that they've done. And I've already talked a fair amount about a big part of the work that we're promoting is engagement, and that's not just promoting this initiative, but actually trying to create some shared ownership. So within our sector, we've really heartened by how quick the various stakeholder groups were willing to step up and lead the various pieces. And I think that Ken's participation in this session, and as well as the session at UBCM, is a testament to that, as well as the work of his association to help with that inventory and building the business case. And but our engagement efforts extend beyond our own sectors, so that they include other ministries, and local government is going to be huge. And once again, I'll repeat our interest in knowing how to engage the municipal sector, how we can support and add value, and so we will be looking for feedback. And then we have not done much in either the business sector, a little bit more in the NGO sector, but those will be key areas for us as well. So this is our last slide, and it just repeats what was in the presentation. And so I'll just leave that with you. I gather questions are at the end, and
so thank you very much, Claire. So that, we'd like to turn things over to Ken. Ken, I believe you're next up. Ken, if you could please hit *7, unmute your line.
So can everybody hear me?
You sure can. Go ahead.
Great, thank you. We see ourselves as a leader here. Our project was a joint project between the school district, obviously, the Ministry of Education, and the village of Port Clements. Just so people get a sense of what we're talking about, Haida Gwaii, it used to be called the Queen Charlotte Islands too, but that name has now disappeared. We're an archipelago in the Pacific Ocean. We're about a 5 to 6 hour ferry ride from Prince Rupert, in case anybody was wondering where we are. Port Clements is a town in the middle of Graham Island and on Masset Inlet. So while it's an inland village, it's also on the ocean and does have tides. Population of approximately 300 to 500 people, and the main industry there is logging, and I should probably say was logging. Just a bit of background for you. The village of Port Clements in 1998 began a process to put together a community multiplex facility. They formed a society and raised some money. They put out an RFP. Well, they quickly realized with the amount of money that they had raised that the kind of building they wanted to build was well beyond their means. And here's a look at what was the village office in Port Clements that was part of what they were trying to replace. School board involvement. We, as a school board, began to be concerned about maintaining an elementary school in Port Clements. It was a school that was built for about 150 pupils and had declined to about 40 students. And the school district then met with Port Clements Council to explore the viability of having a multiplex building and a school together. The mayor of the day actually went to UBC and talked to the then Minister of Education and the Premier, Mrs. Bond, and the Ministry of Education was supportive of the whole concept. And so there's a look at the school, and I know as you look around the province, you probably see many schools that look like this. One of the advantages that we had in Port Clements is that we had a standalone gym, and in the picture that you see, you can see that standalone gym on the left-hand side, and that was actually retained as part of the multiplex project. So some of the things that we had to begin to think about as a group, both the village and ourselves, when we began talking about sharing a building was who would own the building, where would it be located, how would the building be insured, once completed, who would maintain the building and do such things as cut the grass and clean the floors, how would future renovations be handled, what effect would the existing union contracts have on a shared building, especially since the village didn't have any unionized employees. We also have to consider third parties here because we were planning on a shared school and public library, and so the Vancouver Island Regional Library and their board had to be involved. And how would a shared public school library work? Although there had been some examples already, it was a challenge that we were faced with. One of the things that we discovered early on was that we had to consult with everybody and keep them up to date on the progress. We had to also keep the provincial funding organizations and our parent organizations, like our board and the Ministry of Education, online. A concern raised by teachers, of course, was student safety. If you're having a public building with the public coming in and out, what effect would that have on students? And then there were considerations about the construction phase of the project, like who would make decisions about extras, how would cost overruns be handled, and who would actually sign the contracts with engineers and consultants. In time, we overcame all of those obstacles and answered all of those questions. I would tell you that the project, and obviously questions continue to come up that both the Village of Port Clements and ourselves deal with. Here was how the funding was gathered for this project. A local trust on the island, Guy Trust, provided us with $1 million. They had already committed that to the village as part of their multiplex program. The Ministry of Education put just under $1 million, and the province, through its infrastructure grant, put in $1.6 million. As a school district, we added $200,000, and we did spend a fair amount renovating the gym as well. The School Community Connections grant at that time was $200,000, and we applied that to the project. And locally, the village of Port Clements, over the number of years they were talking about the multiplex, gathered $312,000 as well. So we created a building committee. It included the mayor and 2 village councillors, a community member, and it was, interestingly enough, it was one of the original community members that were part of the Multiplex Society, and of course the village administrator. From the school board side, we had a principal, a teacher, a support staff member, a member of DPAC, a trustee, and of course myself on the committee. So what does our multiplex include? If you look at the slides as you're going through them, you'll see some of the construction. It was a wood frame construction, and you'll see construction of the project ongoing in picture form as you're looking at these slides. The school is made up of 3 classrooms now, an administrative office and school washrooms. The municipality part of the building is made up of municipal offices as well as council chambers. And then we have shared and community part in the building, which are a school, a public library, a senior center, a daycare, a commercial kitchen, and a shared staff room. Now that daycare has expanded now because we also have a Strong Start at Port Clements, so the daycare is a daycare and our Strong Start. The construction was interesting as well because what we chose to do is, rather than hire off-island contractors, we bought all the lumber on island, and we hired a project manager who actually hired local people. So we used local materials and local people on island, and they, under the direction of our project manager, did the actual construction of the building. The initial construction started in 2008, and the school and municipal office moved in on January 1st, 2009, and the building was officially opened on April 1st, 2009. The building is right in the center of Graham Island, and so many people now use this building for meetings because coming from Masset or coming from Queen Charlotte, it's halfway between roughly, and people use that building as a meeting place. So what were the benefits to the community? Obviously, we replaced that old municipal office, which was almost about to fall down. We replaced our old school facility, and again, we chose to demolish that by local contractors. It provided a permanent daycare space for youth and preschool, and now our Strong Start program. There's a permanent room for seniors. They've now added some equipment in there, and they actually run movies in there on a weekly basis. Obviously, for the school district and the village, there was a huge reduction in fuel and utility costs, and there is sharing of space. We share a staff room. We share the gymnasium. During school, obviously, the school books it, but after school and in the summer, it's booked by the village staff. And, of course, there's the daycare and the shared library. And so, as I said, there's expanded use for partnering groups who hold meetings. I wanted to share with you some of the keys that I feel were keys to success of this project. Obviously, there was a growing need in the community, both by the village and by the school district. There was also a fear of the people at Port Clements that, for example, if they didn't do something or didn't get together with the school district and have a project like this, that if they didn't do anything, something would be done to them. I should tell you, from the committee that we worked on, there was an absolute willingness to work together. Everybody was focused on what the goal of this project was, and the committee worked really well together. One of the things that we were faced with, obviously, was a view of your own institution. In other words, your sacred cows. And people often said in our meetings, well, we always did it this way. And of course, you had to look at that in a whole new way now. And I would tell you that most people, both in the committee and in the community, were pretty open to doing that. We obviously needed support of the elected officials. Both the Ministry of Education, the board, and Village Council were all squarely behind this project. The other thing is that we took the Obama approach, because many people said to us, oh, you can't do it. It won't happen. But we kept saying, yes, we can, and yes, we will build this project, and we did in light of opposition from many people. What I'm going to show you now are some pictures of the building. This is actually the school entrance to the building. And this is a side view showing the library, which is the metal, silver-looking part of the building in the background. And this is the village entrance to the school, and the silver piece that you see is the actual council chambers. And this is another side view, and you can see in the background the actual gym. When this picture was taken, on the left-hand side, there's still a corner of the old school, which has since been torn down. Here again is a view of the entrance with the gym in the background. And here are some of the classrooms. Now, I would tell you that these pictures were taken early on. There's certainly a lot more artwork and stuff up in the classrooms now than there was in these early pictures I'm going to show you. This is a picture of the daycare and now our Strong Start room. This is a picture of the shared library, and we're standing on the school side. There's an entrance from the school side of the hallway into the library and an entrance from the public side into the library. We did wrestle for a number of months with Vancouver Island Regional Library about having a shared library. In fact, initially, they wanted a wall down the middle of the library, and we've convinced them and their executive director and the board that in a small community like this, we were able to share both the school and public library. And what you're looking at was the public part. I must tell you that Bureau certainly came to the table once the school was open, because they provided the village of Port Clements with almost a whole new set of library books. This is a look down the hallway. You're looking from the school side, and you can see at the end of the hall the door is closed, and that separates the municipal shared side from the school side of the building. This is a look in at the municipal office. You're looking at the secretary and the administrator. This is a look at the public library from the hallway and their book display case. This is a look from inside on the school entryway, looking outside and towards the gym. This is a look again at one of the classrooms. And finally, here's a look at the council chambers. And I think that completes my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thanks very much, Ken. Great presentation. And now we'd like to move things over to Gary in Wells. Gary, could you please hit star 7? No, sorry, Gary, we still can't hear you. Can you try that again? Star 7?
Okay, we are online?
Yep, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you and good afternoon, everyone. The Wells-Barkerville Community School is located in the district of Wells, small municipality about 80 kilometers east of the city of Quesnel. It is the only school in North Caribou servicing about 500 residents of the semi-remote Wells, Barkerville, and Bowen Lakes region. The school, initially constructed in the 1940s, was unfortunately built to the standards of those times with little attention paid to matters such as insulation and energy efficiency. Thus, it was very expensive to operate. The school does, however, have a very functional layout with 2 active classrooms and a large kitchen on the main floor, as well as a library with a computer center. Upstairs, there are 3 vacant classrooms, as well as an early learning center for our Strong Start and other preschool programs. Rounding out the facility is a 4,500 square foot gymnasium annex that was added in the 1960s. Currently, 18 children in grades K through 7 attend the school and are normally instructed by a single teacher, with curriculum enrichment provided through the involvement of parents and other community volunteers. Now, the story of how the community came to own the school would be a presentation in itself. Suffice to say that in 2002, the Quesnel School Board announced their intention to close the school and bus our children to Quesnel, some 80 kilometers away. For the next year, our community vigorously opposed the closure, using every legal means at our disposal, but without any success in altering the board's decision. By the spring of 2003, we were out of time, being within weeks of the school closure. Fully aware that without the school we would not have a viable community, the municipality stepped in and initiated negotiations with the school board to explore alternate solutions to the closure. We started off by mutually agreeing that any solution was better than having young children on a bus for 3 hours a day. From there, we negotiated a simple 2-page letter of agreement that has successfully defined our community's relationship with the school board for the past 7 years. The details of that agreement, the Wells solution, are as follows. First, the town would buy the school along with all the school board property in Wells for $1. The school district would continue their elementary school program in Wells and pay the town $5,000 a year in rent for the area of the school they used. The term of the agreement would be for 10 years. There were escape clauses for both parties should enrollment fall or building costs dramatically increase. There was a provision to allow other uses of the school by the town or third parties, but also recognizes the need to ensure that any such use did not interfere with or present a hazard to the students. And finally, there was a defined assignment of costs between the town for the operation and maintenance of the building and the school district for their educational programs. Now, historically, the building had been very expensive for the school board to operate, with most of the costs being related to the antiquated heating system and the lack of insulation. Consequently, following the transfer of the property to the town, we went to work to correct that situation. We started by insulating the school roof and walls, and then created separate heating zones within the school to better manage heat and power demands. We carried on making improvements last year when we completed installation of a state-of-the-art geothermal heating system. This was a major project costing approximately $500,000 and which took 2 years to complete. Along with the heat exchangers you see in the slide, the project also involved extensive upgrades in the classrooms and the drilling of 16 heat exchange wells in the schoolyard, each about 300 feet deep. To optimize the benefits from what was now a community facility, we converted the school basement into a community fitness center that is both well used and generates revenue for the town. We also upgraded the school playground, addressing neglected safety issues and replacing out-of-date equipment. As the school property was fairly large and underutilized, we turned part of the surplus grounds into a community greenhouse, gardens, and a recycling center. All of these capital improvements were accomplished at little or no cost to local taxpayers by sourcing financial grants available only to local government. In terms of the stability of the education program at the school, once the school situation was resolved, we were again able to attract young families with children to the community. As a result, our student numbers have doubled since 2003, in contrast to many other northern schools with falling enrollment. Strong numbers in our preschool programs indicate that maintaining future enrollment levels will not be a problem. But independent of the elementary school usage, operating costs for the building is still an additional financial burden to the community. As such, we have promoted alternate uses for the facility that can coexist with the primary educational function. In the summers, we now lease much of the building to the Island Mountain Arts Society for their workshops and educational programs. They also use the school as a performance venue during the annual Arts Wells Music Festival in August, which this year was recognized as one of the top 10 music festivals in Canada. In the spring, the school gymnasium is used to house school groups from around the province who come to visit nearby Barkerville Historic Town as part of their educational program. The school offers a low-cost option for overnight stays, bringing in about $4,000 annually to offset building costs. In the winter, additional revenue is generated from the empty upstairs classrooms, which are rented out to local artists as studio space. So how has all this worked out financially? Relative to our population, it has not been cheap. We are, in effect, being doubly taxed for public education. Property owners in Wells must still pay provincial school taxes like everyone else, but in addition, also must pay about 10% of their local municipal taxes to operate the school. For 2010, that was on average about $100 per taxable parcel. With each year, the amount of local tax money needed has been dropping, and we are again projecting lower costs in 2011, primarily related to the changeover to geothermal heat. But the really important thing about all this is not on a balance sheet. In saving our school, we are absolutely convinced that we saved our community. Once the school issue was resolved, our population decline reversed as new businesses opened and new families came to live in Wells. A community can-do attitude emerged among many residents that has helped drive numerous public and private projects and has helped remake Wells as a desirable place to live. Although no community should ever have been placed in the position we were placed in, given that we were, then saving the school was probably the most important action we could have taken to ensure the continued viability of our community. And that's it. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Gary. All very informative presentation. So with those done, now we'd like to turn to our discussion time. If I could just point your attention back to the feedback button in the top right-hand corner of your screen on the toolbar. If you have any questions, can I ask you right now to please go to that, open the scroll down menu there, change your indicator from green to purple, which is question, and ask your questions. Great, I can see we've got one already. Ken Campbell, one of our presenters. Ken, could you, if you haven't done so already, hit *7 and direct your question to whoever it may be.
Well, I'm going to ask a question to Gary. Gary, is the school district still paying the salary of the teacher that is at the Wells School?
Oh, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Go ahead, Gary.
Okay, great. Yes, the agreement is that all costs associated with the educational program are covered off by the school district. The town covers off all the O&M costs for the building and the property.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ken. Ken, if you could change your indicator back to proceed. And Renee, you're next. If you could hit *7, please. Hi, Renee McCloskey. If you could please hit *7. So not #7, but *7, please. I heard something there. That might be you.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to thank the presenters and wondering if a copy of this presentation is going to be available after the webinar is complete.
Yes, absolutely. We on our Rural BC website, we will be archiving this presentation, so we'll have the slides and the audio and the discussion period. It will all be available there, as well as some of the supplementary materials that we have. So the URL for that is www.ruralbc.ca at gov.bc.ca. So the resources we do indicate, I believe, at the end of this presentation. Great, Renee, if that answers your question, please change your indicator back. And Art, you've got a question, I believe. Please hit *7. Hi, Art Lou. Yeah, if you could please hit *7, and again, that's not #7, but *7.
Hello?
Hi, we can hear you now.
Okay. This is a question for Ken. He might have mentioned it in his presentation. I guess I should know just from reading our local observer. But who is owning the Multiplex building in Port, and what is the arrangement for the non-owner in terms of contributing costs?
So the owner is the school district because it's on school district property, and there's no cost to the village except for their portion of utilities. So the way we calculate that is we actually have a formula that changes based on the square footage of the rooms being used. So the board pays for all the utilities and then bills the village for the cost of their portion. They also receive revenue from Vancouver Island Regional Library Board for having the public library.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for your question, Art.
Yes.
Chris Bone, please hit *7 and ask your question.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I actually have two questions. The first is, in the first presentation, I think there was a reference made to tools and resources, specifically a joint use agreement template. And I was wondering if that is available, and if it isn't currently, when it might be available.
This is Claire. We have it winding its way through some approval processes, but we have shared a draft when it's been requested, so we're happy to do that.
Right. So that we could simply send you an email then, Claire, and to ask for a draft of that? Great, thank you very much. The other question I had was, we know from researching some other models across the country that in some of the eastern provinces, they've had some success building what they call Service Plus centers that actually saw schools not only have a neighborhood learning component, but also have a service center approach where you could drop in and access a range of government services. I'm wondering what the thinking is in this province around that concept, and if there was any consideration of that model.
We have been interested in that and have had some discussions with Shared Services BC, and libraries are also, I'm going to look at Ben here, libraries have also been interested in doing something similar. So,
there's been a pilot with the government agents in 7 or 8 communities across the province to look at that very idea, at what kind of cross-training can happen between public library staff and government agents, and then perhaps what opportunities might exist to co-locate. So it is on the radar, and we could share, I suppose, what communities that's happened in also.
And of course, we're really interested in public libraries being co-located in schools. So they all are a nice fit.
And we have one more question in our shared table here. Is that okay?
Go ahead, Chris.
This is Tina Watt, long-range planner at the City of Prince George. Further from Chris's question in regards to service provision, I guess some of the probably schools we're thinking of is they're already closed, and looking at the various different uses that could potentially go in there and working in partnership and how to create those partnerships and work together with the school district. But my concern a little with the servicing aspect is for where the location of these schools are, is you're introducing sort of that commercial office use. Yeah. So in any of the research moving forward on this, that's something to consider is that land use planning perspective is how you're, maybe this is one of those questions of, oh, this is how we've always done it, and being able to let go of those sorts of things. But there is also concerns from existing residents within that neighborhood that would have concerns having a commercial office use from that service side of things. There are other services that are different from office uses and could detract from other revitalization projects, for example. Just a comment. Thank you.
Absolutely, and parking would be an example of a change use, and so yes, that's on our radar. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Jim Newman, please, if you could hit *7.
Yes, it's a question for Gary Champagne in Wells, and it's just wondering, was there any economic development correlation done between the increase in taxes to the community and the new families that were attracted to the community because of the school being there, and any new businesses that opened?
I'd have to say there was no formal analysis done, but at the point where the school was closing, the community was essentially at probably one of its lowest points. Our population was dropping, businesses were closing, families were moving out. It's difficult to put numbers to it, but I mean, there was a clear change once the school was secured. Everything changed. I guess it's the easy way to put it, and everything has been pretty good since. So it was one of those situations where it was like a turning point in the community. And part of that might have also been a result of the fact that the community came together so well in terms of common goals to save the school, and that energy was transferred into the community in positive ways. I don't think that really answers your question, but more or less the answer to your question is no. There was no formal analysis done. Well, we're just not in a position to do that sort of thing. We're just very small.
Okay, thank you.
Gary and Jim, for your question. Jim, if you could change your indicator back to green if you don't have a further question. And Chris Bowen, I'd ask the same unless you do have a question for us. We're certainly very keen to have any questions you may have. Please don't be hesitant. If you have any questions, let us know. All right, great. Please, *7 again and ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yep, please go ahead, we can.
Okay, again to Ken, and I guess I'm moving a little bit beyond Port Clements at the moment, and I'm thinking of the town of Masset, and I think there's some real possibilities there because of the strategic planning session I just attended at the high school, which did identify a need for more involvement in the community in the learning process, which really ties in with this neighborhood learning center. And of course we have a library as well, and the synergies of bringing the various facilities together at the high school possibly, and I know there's been some discussion of even combining the elementary school to Hagen with the Dawson High School. Has there been any discussions ensuing about expanding that concept to Masset or Charlotte for that matter?
Actually, where we've had the most discussions is with Sandspit, because of course Sandspit being on the other island, there really needs to be a school there. But again, they're in the same situation that Port Clements was, in that we've got a small school, and their school population fell to 28 students this year. So we really have been trying to work with the municipality there in Sandspit about sharing. Both in Massa too, at Tahagan and at GMD, of course, those were schools that were built for 300 and 400 students, and we're now down to 110 students in GMD and just over 107 students in Tahagan. So, these are ongoing discussions that we need to have with the communities. But at this point, there has been no decisions made about closing schools or any of that kind of stuff. In fact, the board hasn't even discussed those issues.
I realize it's not about closure of schools, but the dialogue that took place at the strategic planning process up at Dawson really indicated, both from the administrative teacher side, right through the family side, right through the student side, and through community organization side, that there's a need to integrate the school with more community-based kind of connection in terms of learning process, to improve the opportunities for the kids through the learning process. And maybe by, maybe looking at this from a different perspective, so we don't shut down doors, just look at us creating a whole new learning environment, which sort of will promote better education within that community and provide more facilities, particularly if it can provide more public facilities. As you know, we've lost our recreation center. And, sort of build those kind of synergies together, make the community a little massive, somewhat more vital, which could help start rebuilding it by attracting people to move back rather than moving out.
Yeah, no, I'm all for that. And we have taken, some tentative steps. We are now doing a daycare, for example, along with our Strong Start in Tahagan. And we've moved out of what was the old learning center, and that's available for rent or even for recovery of cost for a community facility. We did talk with the college there, but they decided not to move in. So yes, those discussions need to happen, and I agree that we need to work with the community to do that kind of thing. But I would honestly tell you at this point there have been no plans made.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Art. Thanks, Ken. Jim Newman, you're next. Please, star 7. Hi, Jim Newman. We're still not able to hear you. Nope, that might be working. Is that you now?
Are you there? Are you there?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
All right, this question is for Gary. Gary, from your presentation, it seemed to me that there was a little bit of your community kind of battled every battle to keep your school. So my question is, do you have any suggestions on how to approach school administrations or trustees to kind of think out of the box to consider alternatives to school closure?
Well, that's a very good question. And to paraphrase our situation, we've been through a year where, we were fighting the school board tooth and nail. There were demonstrations, hunger strikes. It was pretty intense. In the end, what it came down to was sitting down with the school district administration and just putting our cards on the table and having a administrator-to-administrator discussion as to how we could solve this problem in a business-like fashion. And that's really how the agreement was finally formulated. So in a way, we had to park a year's worth of conflict, essentially, and sit down. In fact, we actually hammered that agreement out over a cup of coffee one afternoon in the superintendent of schools office, and then brought it back to our respective political groups and got the board and the council to agree to it. So I guess the advice would be sometimes it's better to just go for the business solution right away, although Perhaps the political bodies might not have been as willing to seek a settlement if we hadn't gone through that period of struggle. So it's a difficult call. I think each situation has to be assessed on its own merits.
So in your situation, the bottom line was dollars and cents to the school board, and how you could help them to fix their dollars and cents issue.
In a matter of speaking, yes. It was also, in terms of the town's perspective, it was the survival of the community that was at stake. So we were heavily motivated to find a solution. On the other hand, from the school board's perspective, I think they were heavily motivated to make the problem go away. So together, we were able to act out what was a relatively simple agreement. And as I said, it was basically a letter of agreement, and it stood the test of time. We're going into year 8 now with that letter of agreement. It's got a 10-year term. I've had some preliminary discussions with the current school board superintendent, and they seem to be quite happy with the agreement as it stands, and I don't think there'll be a problem in getting it renewed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Gary. Chris, you're next on the list. Please, star 7.
Hi, this is Glenda Newsom with Chris, and this is a question for Claire. We have a number of schools that have already closed in our community, and I'm just wondering if you have any examples of other communities where their facilities have reopened or in the process of reopening under this type of model or another model.
I'm going to ask Ben or Phil to remind me the name of the school up Vancouver Island that closed and then reopened. It's on our website.
It is
now you're going to challenge me. We can get back to you, though, Chris, because there is an example of a school that's closed and has reopened.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Ken, you've got a question.
Well, I don't have a question. I just wanted to make a comment, too, with Jim's question and Gary's response. You know, we ended up in different places, certainly Wells and Port Clements, but you know what? The impetus was still the same, and there was still a desire of the school district and the community in both cases to end up working together to provide a solution. And as I said in my presentation, you know, the real desire of the people in both the school board and the community, with the support of the ministry, to come to a solution seems to work. And while our examples are very different, certainly the results and the reason that we ended up in that place were very similar.
Great. Thanks, Ken. Are there any other questions out there, comments? Well, we do actually have a few questions. Perhaps we could pose of you. Yeah, we do have a couple questions here. We thought we could ask these back to you. Yeah, please respond to these. How often do your community schools and local government interact? Is there anyone there that could speak to that particular question, or is that a question for the audience here? Is there anyone there that could speak to that question in their particular example?
Well, I don't want to, it's Ken Campbell again, I don't want to, you know, we don't do it enough. I mean, we were forced to with Port Clements, and now we're forced to because we're in the same building as them, so we see them quite often. But it should be done more often, in my opinion.
Great. Art, please go ahead. Art Lou. Please, Art, if you hit star 7.
Anybody there?
Go ahead.
Okay. I hear on the island, working in all of the communities, I've often found the schools, and I don't have involvement with local government, but certainly working with lots of nonprofit organizations and other local groups, I know there's been a level of receptiveness by the schools to allow local groups to use them out of school hours. Often when they plead bankruptcy or some other form of no money, the schools do kind of help out in helpful kind of ways. I guess the one thing that I feel is it's not sort of a coordinated thing. It seems to be very ad hoc, and it certainly could be helpful for schools in rural areas which are facing various kinds of challenges, among them potential school closures, to take a more proactive, be more proactive about getting the community to use those schools and working with community groups, not just with the municipalities, to discover how that could best be achieved. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Art. Wendy Lambert, could you please hit star 7 and make your comment, or?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yeah, please go ahead.
I work in a community school, and the local government that I most often interact with is the Parks and Recreation Department of our municipal government, and that works out quite well in terms of day-to-day communication. We try to work collaboratively. We're on Vancouver Island. There's a joint use agreement for space in the schools between the school district and the local municipal government. I haven't been able to get my hands on it and have a look at that, and I don't know how successful it is in satisfying the needs of both groups. But I think that somebody mentioned that communication was one of the strategies. I think that there is room for a lot of improvement there, and I think that the school community connections concept is the way to go for that, especially as we have a lot of smaller communities, and we're always interacting with each other, so it makes sense to be consulting with each other on all these topics as well. I do have a related question in that I'm interested in how community schools, as they exist now, fit into the neighborhood learning centers. And we don't have, in our area, we don't have the same needs that have been shown by the two presenters today, which is really interesting, but also really dramatic closures to be faced and strong needs. Our needs aren't as great, but we don't want to lose what we have, and we want to keep the positive things that the community schools are already doing in our area, and it would be interesting to know how we can do that within the neighborhood learning centers concept. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Wendy.
Sure. So it's Claire here, and I can respond to that. But first, before I do, I just want to let Chris know that Rob Ron is the school that closed up in Campbell River and then reopened. And there's another example in the north of the province, and we'll figure that one out and get that one back to you. But in terms of how community schools fit within the neighborhood learning center paradigm, they are a part of the mix. But the way we think about them is that it is a model, and it's a model that has largely coalesced around schools with large populations of vulnerable students, and it has a coordination function and services to support those students, and whereas neighborhood learning centers is broader than that, it's intended to support the general population, that it isn't a model of functioning or sort of a governance board. It can look lots of different ways. I sometimes think of them as a continuum, and at the one end of the continuum are community schools that are a fully fleshed out and developed model, but really are only one. So we would certainly count all community schools as neighborhood learning centers, but not all neighborhood learning centers are community schools, so that's how we distinguish them. We are working really closely with ACBCs, which is the Association of Community Educators, and in fact they're doing some contract work for us and to support this initiative, and we have learned lots and have used lots of examples of how they work on our website, and they include lots of stories on our success stories. So I think that's the distinction. In terms of continued support for community schools, I don't think we're going to see government specifically supporting a model like that. That's something that's negotiated with school districts, and I don't see that changing. And certainly there's, probably, 100 community schools approximately in the province, and so clearly there's still, quite strong interest in that, in community schools, and lots to be learned. And so, does that answer your question, Wendy?
I think so.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Claire. And thanks, Wendy. Is there any other comments, questions at all? There was another question there we had touched upon, but how often have your community schools and local governments consulted with each other regarding community use of space? Is there anyone wishes to comment to that, or any examples within their community?
Another question I would be interested in putting out there, and for either people to answer, for those of you who are online, or to answer afterwards, is how government can engage better with the municipal sector to support this type of work. And so advice on how to do that would be appreciated. Thoughts?
Renee, please, star 7. Hi, Renee, we're still not able to hear you, so that's star 7, please. We can hear you trying, but still doesn't seem to get there. Are you there now? Okay, I am. I'm just going to open up all the lines right now, so warning out there, everyone.
We can hear you.
We can hear you all. So just a moment.
The conference has been unmuted.
Okay, all lines are now open. Renee, please, go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Okay, terrific. I just had a comment with respect to engaging local government with this issue. One of the challenges that our board faces, and I'm sure we're not too unique in this, is the concern about getting too involved with supporting the schools, because it accepts the provincial downloading and puts the onus of funding for schools in local government, and there's some philosophical discussions that happen around our board table about whether that's appropriate. I mean, we certainly see a role in trying to keep our communities, and especially our rural communities, active and vibrant, and see education and schools as a key part of that. But philosophically, it's been something that our board's really challenged with, is how involved that they want to get with this.
So it's Claire. I mean, if I could respond a little bit, I can appreciate that perspective. A place that we're trying to get to is sort of the better use of the space, not necessarily offsetting costs for schools. So really, we're just trying to shift. And in my world, our vision would be that it wouldn't be just consultation around how schools were used. It would be the broader community. So how that space is used and sort of that kind of broader ownership of those kind of public spaces. And I don't know if I'm explaining that very well, but so that, for instance, if the municipality had a greater need for recreational space before building something new and separate, they would look to the school and maybe either use that school space differently or add to it versus doing something separate. I guess that's how we're trying to see that. But certainly I appreciate your perspective.
Great. Thank you, Renee and Allison. Yeah. Any more questions out there, comments? Heard a little background noise there, I think. I'm not sure if it was a comment. Perhaps we'll put out a last call, last chance for further comments, questions.
So hearing none, we would like to sincerely thank the presenters that joined us today, Gary and Keane on the line. Thank you very much. And Claire and your team in the room, we really appreciate that. These webinars would not be possible without you. And thank you to all the participants that have joined on the line. Just a reminder that you will be receiving a survey, and we strongly encourage you to give us your feedback. It's the only way to make these valuable and meet your needs. So we look forward to receiving that. And with that, we will sign off and say thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Maybe just one reminder that if you want to download any of the handouts online, that those will be available probably for the next 15 minutes, and then only by emailing us.